Before I get to Albert Breer, I want to ask Albert about this. But Dan Orlovsky was on Pat McAfee's show yesterday, and he was talking about Bill Belichick. Here is McAfee's question.
Now, Diana Rossini reported this weekend that people around the building are assuming or preparing for a mutual parting of ways between Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. He will go coach somewhere else if that is the case. Will he be the GM as well? We assume, but who knows? That would be bananas. Yeah. That would be a colossal move in the NFL news cycle.
I've heard that. I've heard more and more of that over the past week. I'm not a reporter, all that stuff, but I have heard that.
You're a journalist.
I have heard that that's going to be the case, and it's kind of who knows the likelihood of it, but I've heard that that's going to happen, and I've heard the location is already kind of determined as well.
Where he's going?
LA Chargers.
I'm not giving. I've heard that.
Okay, let's bring in Albert Breer, the Monday morning quarterback. What the hell is Orlovsky saying?
I mean, I don't know if a destination has been determined. I would say this, though, the Washington stuff has been out there for a while. And, it's something that's been talked about in NFL circles for more than the time that it's been out there in the public. And, that one's interesting to me just because, if you look at the history of things, Dan, we've seen owners bring in older coaches with a track record. It's generally a credibility play. Shad Khan needed credibility in Jacksonville, so he brought in Tom Coughlin. At the beginning of Steve Ross's ownership, in Miami, they had Bill Parcells there as the football czar. So it would make sense if you're trying to restore credibility to your organization and you're Josh Harris. And Josh Harris, by the way, would be able to negotiate this with the Patriots because he went to Harvard Business School with Jonathan Kraft, and they've had a relationship going back over 30 years. So there are some dot connecting you can do there that would make that one make a lot of sense. I do think Bill still wants to coach. Now, that's just my opinion based on, what I've heard from people who know him really, really well and who've been around him. That Shula record is sitting out there. He's 16 wins away. I think at one point we thought it was likely that he would get there in 2024. That looks a lot less likely now. So if you're the Patriots and you're talking about hanging on to him and he's pursuing that Shula record, you'd be talking about another 2 years maybe now. So there's a lot of things there, where you can say it would make some sense. The two teams you hear most connected to Bill have been, at least, from my perspective, been Washington and Dallas, and both in the NFC East, both historic franchises, both with owners that badly want to win, obviously in different spots in their ownership. But it should be interesting going forward. And look, I mean, if you want to go way back in history, and I know I'm being long-winded here, but this is a complex topic. The last two times the Patriots changed coaches, there was a trade involved. They went from, dealing Bill Parcells to the Jets, then they hired Pete Carroll. And then when they brought Belichick in, there was a trade with the Jets that happened there too. And in both cases, both Parcells and Belichick had things lined up before the season ended. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's some back channel communication that happens, towards the end of the year.
What are the Bills doing?
The Bills right now are, I would say, the move here is to try to spark the team. And, I don't want to say their window's closing because I do think when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen, the window remains open. The window is Josh Allen's career. But, with this particular group of players, they're getting older and, clearly something isn't working. So, I think one of the things you do in bringing in Joe Brady is you change the atmosphere in the meeting rooms and on that offensive staff. I think the hope is Joe Brady, through being really organized, a good communicator, a guy who's really inclusive, is going to be able to spark something with the quarterback and with the offense as a whole. And
but what if they win that game, Albert? I mean, if they don't have 12 players on the field, then they win the game. Is Ken Dorsey fired if they win that game?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you're in a short week too. Think about that part of it, right? You're in a short week and, if you win the game, I don't think you do it. And I understand what you're saying, where they're, it's, there was, game operation problems there. That falls on the head coach, no question. 12 guys getting on the field like that falls on the special teams coach, but also falls on the head coach that the game operation was an issue for them. And getting the team out there. The defense, obviously, you have the flag at the end of the game on the throw down field to Jerry Jeudy. So, I think it's very easy to look at this and say, yes, this is more than just an offensive problem. I do think that they recognize with Matt Milano down, with Tre'Davious White down, that the offense is going to have to carry the team, and the offense can't turn the ball over anymore, and the offense needs to be more consistent. And I think that this is a move to try to get a little bit more out of the offense for sure. And we'll see with Joe Brady. I could tell you this: like, teams that interviewed him in 2021 after his first year with the Panthers thought he was a superstar. One team I know came really close to reversing course on their own hire and hiring him. So there are a lot of people in the league that think a lot of Joe Brady. Obviously, he did a good job at LSU before Carolina. There was a bit of a personality conflict between him and Matt Rule, which I think wound up being the reason why he wound up. It didn't work out in 2021. We'll see. If he's as smart as a lot of people think he is, then he should be able to make a difference here down the stretch.
Yeah, but I'm looking at Buffalo's stats. They were second in points and yards last year. They're eighth in points this year, seventh in yards. Is the offense a problem? Is the quarterback?
I think it's the consistency. I think it's consistency. Okay. Honestly, for me, Dan, this is why I thought they should have tried to trade for Saquon Barkley or Jonathan Taylor, in the summer. If I was them, that would be what I would do. Because I think what they need is they need just to be more consistent down to down and in less long yardage situations. And, where they get themselves in trouble is when it just all goes on Josh. As long as Josh is there, they're going to be a top 10 offense. That should be the baseline, right? Okay. What I see and what other teams that have played against them that I've talked to have seen is they get themselves in these long yardage situations and it's okay, Josh, go make a play. How do they get in 2nd and 6 and 3rd and 2 more consistently? I think you started to see it on Monday night when they really got James Cook going, where they can go offensively. It's just not consistently enough looking like that. And, I think if they had again, this was just my idea, but yeah, a Taylor or a Barkley in there. Now you got Josh Allen playing off of play action a little bit more. You're in 2nd and 6 and 3rd and 2 more. You're giving yourself a great chance to be terrifying offensively. When the first play went on first down, there's a negative play, and now all of a sudden you're in 2nd and 13. Well, it becomes a lot easier to defend everything, and the likelihood of a turnover goes way up. So I think the idea here is can we find a way to be a little bit more consistent on offense? Because we know right now, based on the makeup of our team and our defensive injuries, that the offense is going to have to carry the team if we're going to go where we want to go.
Albert Breer.
By the way, this has worked before. I don't know if you remember 10 years ago, John Harbaugh firing Cam Cameron in the middle of the season and Jim Caldwell comes in and they win a Super Bowl. So it's not like there's not a track record of this sort of thing having worked before.
He's Albert Breer, the Monday Morning Quarterback, their senior NFL reporter. The likelihood that Jim Harbaugh is in the NFL, does it increase or decrease given what he's involved with now?
Increase. I think he's sick of the NCAA. I think he likes it at Michigan. I think he's sick of the NCAA. I think he's sick of dealing with all of this. And a lot of that's his own fault, 100%. But I think all the hoops that you have to jump through to be a college coach is a lot anyway, with NIL and the transfer portal, all the different stuff that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis as college coaches. And then you throw the NCAA stuff on top of it. And the fact that he's got unfinished business in the NFL, I think that this makes it more likely that he goes to the NFL. And I quite frankly think if the opportunity's out there for him, he's probably going. Now, is that in Vegas? Would that work for Mark Davis, who's tried to hire him in the past? Maybe. Would that be Chicago? Can he work with Kevin Warren? You remember he and Kevin Warren were at odds a couple of years ago when Kevin Warren was the commissioner of the Big Ten, and Kevin Warren, from all accounts, wants to be involved on the football side in Chicago. Would that work? I don't know, but I think he could make a difference in both those places. And people forget how good an NFL coach he was. And I think one of the things that you can say about Jim Harbaugh that's probably the biggest, I think as big a compliment as you can give him, is he has a style of play that is so distinctive and travels everywhere he goes. Like his teams at Stanford look like his teams for the Niners, look like his teams at Michigan. Yeah. And so if you bring him in, you almost certainly could have like that sort of thing. You could have a very identifiable style of play coming in. And oh, by the way, what if the Bears or Raiders have a top 10 pick and maybe he has a shot at drafting JJ McCarthy? It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, but I don't know if Mark Davis is going to shell out that kind of money again because he's paying Gruden, he's paying Josh McDaniels.
Yeah. And I don't know, that's a very fair question. That's a very fair question. But I mean, he was on the doorstep of hiring. He tried to hire Harbaugh, and like was right there in 2015 when Harbaugh decided to go to Michigan. And like he interviewed actually a GM candidate a couple of years ago, and Ed Dodds, who works for the Colts, who has a good relationship with Harbaugh, who I think is going to be on the Raiders' radar again when they're looking at GM candidates. So yeah, I think the Raiders are definitely one to keep an eye on. Again, the money part of it could come in and be a factor. But I do think that, Jim definitely has some unfinished business in the NFL, and the Raiders would be an interesting landing spot for him.
If the Chargers don't make the playoffs, what happens?
I think by all accounts, I think you'd agree with this, right? That roster is really good.
Yeah.
So if you get rid of the head coach, do you keep the general manager? Because this is Tom Telesco's this would be Tom Telesco's fourth head coach. I don't know. And it does feel to me like, I just talked about Buffalo's window. I think the Chargers are sort of in a similar spot to Buffalo, right? Like where it's like, like the quarterback's there and you're probably going to be good as long as the quarterback's there. But for this particular group of players, right? Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Derwin James, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler. It's not that they don't have young players in the team. They do. They've got good young players in some spots. Like, Rashawn Slater would probably be a really, really good left tackle for a long time for them, But the current core of players is starting to age out a little. And so do you feel an urgency to bring in a guy who can be that guy for you and put you over the top, a la like John Gruden going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2002, where you feel like we got to do everything we can to get the most out of this particular group of players. So let's take a big swing now. I certainly could see something like that happening. And again, Brandon Staley's got a chance now to prove who he is as a head coach over the next 2 months. But based on the fact that, contractually he's at a point where that's generally a decision point on whether you extend a guy or fire a guy. And where they've been as a team over the last, 3 years, whether they're getting better, all of that. Absolutely. This is a critical couple months for Brandon Staley and that franchise.
Good to talk to you as always, Albert. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.
That's Albert Breer, the Monday Morning Quarterback.